I've also found out something else which is quite interesting, and I don't know how much I can touch on it tonight, but I don't think that Newton and Darwin are commensurate. I think that most modern people are Newtonians, not Darwinians. And I think that you can understand the grammar of belief, which is religious in nature, using Darwinian principles. But it means that you have to give up your Newtonian presuppositions. And so I think I can make that argument implicitly with what I'm doing as I progress tonight. So the first thing I'm going to tell you is that it's necessary for you to look at the world through a limited frame of reference. The reason for that is you're not very smart. Your consciousness can only handle about 4 bits of information per second. It's not very much, given that the number of bits of information coming at you from the external world are, for all practical purposes, infinite. You're, like Aldous Huxley suggested, your brain seems to be primarily a reducing agent. Your body's a reducing agent as well, because there are lots of things that you just can't detect, and then the room that you're sitting in is a reducing agent because it's keeping all sorts of things out that you would otherwise have to deal with, and the stability of this city is a reducing agent because we're not going to be stampeded by barbarians with any luck at every moment or any moment. We deal with the complexity of the world in part by inhabiting a sequence of reducing structures until the world is reduced enough so that we can actually deal with the minute elements of it that we can comprehend at any one moment. And those elements we comprehend are not the familiar objects of objective reality. In fact, animals, and people included, aren't much interested in objective reality. We're interested in pragmatic reality. Pragmatic reality is the reality that you act on, not that you perceive. And because we're embedded in bodies, and because we're biological organisms, and because we're concerned with survival and reproduction, among other things, how to act is a much more important question for us than what is the world constituted of. How to act, in some sense, is also the prime Darwinian question, right? Because if you act wrongly from a Darwinian perspective, you end up dead before you can reproduce. So Darwinism is a pragmatic theory. In fact, the pragmatists, the American pragmatists on the North American East Coast recognized that very short period of time after Darwin's studies were published. They recognized the connection between pragmatism as a theory and Darwinian theory instantaneously. So the world that we inhabit, given that we're alive, and given that what selected us to act, is actually a pragmatic world. And the objects of pragmatic worlds aren't objects, they're tools and obstacles. And they have valence a priori. They have value a priori. From the Newtonian perspective, you look at the world, and then you think about the world that you see, the objects of the world that you see, and then you evaluate them, and then you act, and that is not how your brain works. It's just wrong. You might see the value of things before you see the object itself. I mean, there are people, for example, who are blind. They have blind sight. They can recognize emotions on faces without knowing they can see. So that's partly because their retinas are attached to their amygdala. Your retina is attached to a lot of your body, not just your visual cortex. It's attached to your spinal cord. It's attached to your nervous system at multiple levels of analysis simultaneously. And so you can use your eyes to detect things that you don't know you're seeing. So, and what in some sense, what you often detect under those circumstances is valence, value. So you're very good, for example, at detecting teeth and predatory eyes, and the reasons for that are self-evident fundamentally.